Welcome to my PowerPoint about the rune system. So, what are runes? Death Knight has up to 3 rune slots that can be filled up in any way you like. They can only go up to 3 runes, of course, so 3 Frost, 3 Blood, 3 Unholy. This can be combined to say 2 Blood, 1 Frost, 2 Unholy, 1 Frost, 1 Blood, 1 Unholy, 1 Frost, in any order that you can think of, as long as it adds up to 3. Each of the runes do have their own primary strengths that Blizzard themselves have listed. Frost usually is about freezing the board and doing burn damage to the opponent, as well as drawing a pretty good amount of cards. Unholy is typically about generating a lot of corpses, swarming the board, and having a lot of death rattles. And then Blood is about health gain, like maximum health gain, life steal on their cards, and removal. So let's talk about Blood. Blood is all about controlling the pace of the game, outliving your opponent, and grinding them down. The first and only triple Blood rune legendary was Alexandros Mograine, a 7-mana 7/7 undead that reads Battlecry for the rest of the game, deal 3 damage to your opponent at the end of your turns. This actually gave inevitability to Blood Death Knight. You would still have to build a pretty big board to be able to kill your opponent, but having their health be typically in the 21 to 18 to 24-ish range because of Alexandros Mograine just applying pressure did actually matter. Alexandros Mograine, a lot of the times you would either try to get multiple copies of it because its effect does stack if you have multiple Mograines played. So you could play Bran with Mograine, which did exist at the time. It was something people would do. You could Zola the Mograine, you could bounce it back to your hand. You could do so many different things to get more copies or more instances of Mograine. And before the nerf to all triple rune cards, it was one of the best targets to take off of Hematurge, which, if you don't know, Hematurge is 2 mana 2/3. Battlecry, spend a corpse to get a blood rune card. So it was really good off of that. You would run cards like Paparazzi, which was introduced in Festival of Legends, which is 3 mana 3/4, discover a legendary minion, just to get more copies of like your Alexandros Mograine. It was very powerful. Then the literally only other triple blood rune card is Vampiric Blood. It's like Shield Black on crack. It's 2 mana, give your hero +5 health, then spend 3 corpses to gain 5 more and draw a card. This on its own is a very powerful effect. However, because Blood Death Knight doesn't have very efficient ways to generate corpses, Vampiric Blood is a hard card to actually use if you've ever actually played like a Blood Death Knight deck, because they have cards like Corpse Explosion, which is 5 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions, repeat for each corpse you have, until they die, of course. Until all minions die, of course. So, Corpse Explosion is like a big corpse spender, but it's one of the most powerful removal cards in the entire game. So, it's almost like a trade-off, right? Am I going to be spending corpses to play my very powerful triple blood card in Vampiric Blood, or am I going to save these corpses that I don't have very much of for removal? That's part of the issue with Blood Death Knight in terms of like power level, is the restriction of not having many corpses. But as time goes on, we are given, rune neutral, just non-runed cards that are able to cover up some weaknesses of these different runes. In the case of this scenario, we have Mining Casualties. Mining Casualties, of course, is 2 mana, summon 2 1/1 Silverian Recruits with Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Frail Ghoul. The Frail Ghoul is like the hero power token from Death Knight. So it's 2 mana to get 4 corpses, and it's like it's just incredibly efficient. So it does help cover up a lot of the weaknesses of your Blood Death Knight. Then we have Patchwork. So Patchwork is one of the first Blood Death Knight legendaries. It came out in, I think it was in the first core set, and I think it was in the second core set as well, but it's not in the current core set. It is a 7 mana 4/6 undead, Battlecry, destroy a random minion in your opponent's hand, deck, and battlefield. So of course Blood Death Knight is a grinder style control deck. It doesn't have any win conditions. Like, the best you're doing is 3 damage at the end of your turn that you can sometimes get more copies of, right? So Patchwork is incredibly efficient because it can rip powerful combo cards from your opponent's hands. It's like Dirty Rat that also affects the board and deck. Patchwork is like really powerful. If you have played Blood Death Knight, you understand how powerful Patchwork is and how necessary it is, even though relatively speaking it's a pretty simple effect. Like it wouldn't feel like one of those cards that desperately is needed to play the decks because of, you know, its own weaknesses, but it helps cover it up so much that Patchwork just is deceptively strong. Then, as a combination, Blood is also used as combination. Here is an example with Maw and Paw. Maw and Paw is both a Blood and Unholy Runed card. It is a 4 mana 2/8 undead. At the end of your turn, gain 5 corpses. At the start of your turn, spend 5 corpses to give your hero plus 5 health. So, Maw and Paw is useful because it generates you corpses, yes, which is something that Blood Death Knight doesn't have access to, but it will also generate you more maximum health, effectively for free because it does it based on the corpses that Maw and Paw itself generates. This is very useful because, well, you want to be gaining as much health as possible. The only problem is, you see that Unholy Rune right there? Well, you can't run it in a triple Blood Death Knight, but you can run it in Rainbow Death Knight. Yeah, it's really just a corpse spender for Rainbow Death Knight. Yeah, you get the maximum health, so it kind of steals that from Blood, and then it's corpse spending from Unholy, and we'll get to Rainbow Death Knight. Don't get me wrong, but man, I'm not a fan. Blood Death Knight's cool. It is probably, I would say, the favorite of the 3 overall. People really like playing it. It makes them feel like they're playing like a staunch control style class that we haven't really had in the game for a long time, so it is very, very popular. Then we have Frost. So Frost is all about freezing the board, doing burst damage. You can draw a lot of cards with it. It's really good at those 3 things, and not really much else. It's not that great at, like, fighting for board outside of freezing it, but let's get into it. So the first, and only triple rune legendary for Frost is Lady Deathwhisper. This is from the Path of Arthas, like, mini set, kind of, instead of being from an expansion. So it's a 4 mana 4/3 undead. Death Rattle, copy all Frost spells in your hand. Really flashy, I know. Lady Deathwhisper was kind of not that great. It kind of just, like, fell off as time went on, especially around the time that Overseer Frigidara was nerfed, and Overseer Frigidara, well, it was a good card. It was a 6 mana 5/6. Battlecry, draw 2 spells. If they're both frost spells, deal 2 damage to all enemies. And then it was nerfed to a 3/6. And that was pretty significant, actually. It did hurt the deck a lot because you didn't have such a efficient body in Frigidara where it would draw 2 cards, deal 2 damage to all enemies, and it was a 5/6, all for 6 mana. That's genuinely, like, really efficient. So losing out on that attack really hurt the deck. The only triple Frost Rune card, or spell, is Frostworm's Fury. 7 mana, Frost spell, deal 5 damage to all, or deal 5 damage, freeze all enemy minions, summon a 5/5 Frostworm. Again, incredibly efficient to be all packaged together. A 5/5 is worth about 5 damage, 5 mana. Deal 5 damage is worth about 3 mana. Freeze all enemy minions is worth about 3 mana. So it's an incredibly efficient card. Of course, that's what happens with triple rune cards. They are supposed to be very efficient, which is why they're, so powerful. Frostworm's Fury is disgusting, by the way. If you could still discover Frostworm's Fury, it probably would be more disgusting than it is now. It's so unbelievably pushed. Even, like, 2 years after it's come out, it's still an unbelievably pushed card. It is, like, one of the biggest reasons to be playing Frost Death Knight whenever you can. Lately, there have been some lists that will run, like, a few Frost Death Knight cards that don't. Like, there was, with the new expansion, there was, I forget what the name of the card. It's the 3 mana 2/2 Death Rattle freeze 3 random enemies. If they're already frozen, deal 5. There was a Frost Death Knight deck that was played like that didn't run Frostworm's Fury. So it's not like a staple that you need in the style of decks, but it's definitely, like, a really strong card that makes sense in a lot of lists. Frost Death Knight's kind of bad. It's kind of the thing, and it hasn't. I mean, it's been okay at different points in time, but, like, overall it's not been that great, if you ask me. Especially, I mean, obviously in Wild it's been pretty it's been the worst in Wild, by far. Like, of the 3 runes in Wild, it's by far the worst. like no question. Like significantly the worst, because on release in March of the Lich King and in Festival of Legends, Blood Death Knight was genuinely like a tier 3 deck that was actually quite good. On release and for like the first 1 or 2 expansions, even Death Knight was genuinely like a tier 3, tier 2 kind of deck. It was pretty good. And then Frost Death Knight has never been good in Wild. It just hasn't at all. So tying together some runes, we have Blood and Frost in Quartzite Crusher. 4 mana, 3/3 weapon, lifesteal, freeze any character damaged by your hero. So of course it's freezing and it's lifesteal at the same time. Quartzite Crusher is actually a very powerful card. Even though you can't run it in a Blood Death Knight, they still run a card. I can't remember what's the card. It's a 1 mana shadow spell that reads discover a weapon, spend 3 corpses to give it +1/+1. And Quartzite Crusher is one of, if not the best options from that card. Because a 4/4 Quartzite Crusher is huge. It's 16 damage, it's 16 healing, it's 4 freezes. That's a lot for like what you're getting out of it. Then we have Unholy. So Unholy is like the hardest drive to pin down what it really does due to cards like Helia. Helia is, of course, a parasitic card. That's the term that people like to use, where it's one-time expansion cards that don't really do much, don't really synergize with the rest of the class very well. And Helia is really hated. Helia is one of the most hated cards in the entire game. I ran a poll a while back about like the most hated cards in each class, and Helia was like 70% of all options for Death Knight, so people do not like this card. You don't know what Helia is. It is a 4 mana 4/4 with 1 Unholy Rune. Battlecry, shuffle all 3 Plagues into your opponent's deck. Plagues they draw this game are unending. So it's, of course, Plague Death Knight. All of those cards, actually, a couple of them used to be 1 Frost, 1 Unholy, which, again, kind of makes a little more sense than 1 Unholy. I'm going to be so real with you. Because, you know, Frost is all about burn damage, but once that, you know, Frost rune was removed, now it's kind of like, okay, well, you only have the runes for balance reasons at this point, which is not good design. If we're only using runes specifically for balance reasons, not thematically, that's really bad design, and that's kind of how the whole play package feels now, and Helia especially. Helia is disgusting. So Helia is a poorly designed card, just fundamentally. It completely warped the play pattern of, okay, I'm going to shuffle cards against Reno decks, because shuffling cards against Reno decks has been the best way to counter them for a long time. You would shuffle multiple bombs in your opponent's deck, you would shuffle, you would play, gosh, what's it called? Beneath the Grounds, I think it was called. So you'd shuffle spells in your opponent's deck that would summon Nerubian Unravelers for you in Rogue. You would, of course, do Bombs and Warrior. You could play Bad Luck Albatross in the past, which is the 3 mana 4/3 beast. Death Rattle, shuffle 2 1/1 Albatrosses into your opponent's deck. There were multiple ways to shut down Reno decks in the past, and Helia just said, fuck it, and we're going to make it in a way that you can't play around. Because at least those ones, right, you could draw that second copy and turn your Reno stuff back online. But Helia made it so it was offline permanently. And you couldn't do anything about it unless the only thing you could do was wait for your opponent to play every single Plague card and then play Steam Cleaner. And that was really bad, obviously, because if your opponent just held one of their Plague cards, well, your Steam Cleaner wasn't useful at all. Helia is such a terribly designed card. I completely understand why people hate it, and they eventually just reworked all of the Highlander cards that came out and showed in the Badlands to ignore shuffle effects. Yeah, it wasn't entirely because of Helia. It was because of Bran and the fact that they just like have a So the way that the new Highlander cards are worded is if your deck has and started with it's if your deck started with no duplicates, instead of if your deck has and started with no duplicates. Because if it just said has, it literally one word just said that, it would also get turned off by shuffle effects still, which of course they just obviously won't do. So fucking stupid. Let's get to the actual Unholy cards. So, Grave Strength is a 4-mana shadow spell, triple Unholy, that, of course, only triple Unholy spell, same as always. Give your minions +1 attack, spend 5 corpses to give them +3 instead. So it's 4-mana Bloodlust. The corpse cost is negligible because, of course, you are playing Unholy Death Knight, where corpses are abundant. So you're able to give your entire board +3 attack for 4 mana. Yeah, that's really strong. If you're playing even Death Knight, which is what you're probably doing because this is a wild card, you will be playing it with not a wild card. It's a more powerful in wild, I should have said. You can make it so your 1 mana hero power also benefits from this, so you can press the button on the same turn and give it the charge minion +4 attack for only 1 mana instead of 2, like you would if it were in standard. We're talking about standard, and that's powerful. Grave Strength is incredibly powerful. It's like probably the best card in even Death Knight, in Unholy Death Knight. But the issue is that like everything else kind of around it is not that great. So Unholy Death Knight kind of struggles a lot. It's legendary, well, the only, of course, triple rune Unholy Legendary is Lord Marrowgar. 8 mana, 9/7 undead. This was from the core set, if I remember correctly. So it was from March of the Lich King, Path of Arthas, and from the core set, the 3 legendaries. Don't know why they were all different, but it's fine. None of that. They're not all in the game at the same. They're not in standard together, as far as I know. So, Lord Marrowgar, of course, Battlecry, raise all of your corpses as 1/1 Risen Golems with Rush. For each that can't fit, give 1 +2/+2. This was incredible, by the way. Usually, if you're hitting turn 8 with Marrowgar, you'll have like 20 corpses, genuinely. So you'll be summoning like 20, 30 worth of stats from this Lord Marrowgar card. It just won you the game. It's not good. It's not that good anymore because, well, you're hitting turn 8 in Wild nowadays. You just can't win. You'll just lose. Even back last year, hitting turn 8 in this deck was still, you could still win, but I mean, like, late game has gotten so much better for all of these classes. They now have, like, Reno Lone Ranger. They have so much. Every class that plays in the late game just gains so much. So Marrowgar doesn't really do much anymore, and it's really sad because it's like the pinnacle of a late game bomb that you just drop down, and your opponent's like, damn, dude, now I got to deal with this. And you get to apply so much pressure. You get to force out like a full turn of removal, which lets you set up for another like full board to then buff. It's just so nice. It built you a full board, so you could always have like for Grave Strength. Yeah, you would lose out on the corpses because you had to spend them for Marrowgar, but if you had a full board of 7, your Grave Strength still was dealing, giving them all plus attack, which again, because Marrowgar built such a large board, would usually be enough. And then lastly, we have another combination card in Reska the Pit Boss, which is Frost and Unholy. It's 20 mana, 6/3 undead, Rush, costs 1 less for each minion that died this game, Death Rattle, take control of a random enemy minion. So, I completely understand why this is a Unholy card. I can completely understand it, no issue whatsoever, right? It's Death Rattle based, it's all about like minions dying, it makes perfect sense, right? But why is it a Frost Rune card? Absolutely nothing about Reska makes sense for it to be a Frost Rune card. Their Frost Rune cards have almost no Death Rattles that I can think of, like almost none. They aren't about stealing minions. That's just not really a thing that Frost does. It's about freezing minions. And like, I guess you could say the cost reduction might be Frost related because there's a couple Frost cards with like cost reduction. I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense to me at all why Reska is a Frost Rune card. I think it genuinely is one of those cases where they just gave it a rune for balance reasons more than anything else, which is really fucking annoying because this card would have been absolutely amazing in like a triple Unholy Death Knight in Wild. Absolutely amazing. But the long time saying of it's not, so it isn't. Then we have Rainbow Death Knight. So Rainbow Death Knight is very controversial. People don't like it. They just really don't. There are a few players that like playing it, but most people really are upset that Rainbow Death Knight exists, because if Rainbow Death Knight exists, Triple Rune Death Knights don't exist. And the class launched being Triple Rune, and it was advertised as having triple runes, and it was pushed as having triple runes. So to print Rainbow support, they are printing double rune cards that are combination, or they'll just print one runes on cards. So it's like, why even make it an option that there are triple rune cards if you're just never going to print more, ever, and you're never going to print cards that synergize with those decks, ever. It makes no fucking sense. It genuinely makes no sense, and people are rightfully not happy about it. It also doesn't help that the only rainbow card is Climatic Necrotic Explosion, which people, again, don't like. It is a really boring card. There's no winning for Rainbow Death Knight, because Climatic Necrotic Explosion, if you don't know, it's a triple rune rainbow card, so Blood, Frost, Unholy. Lifesteal, deals 6 damage, summon 3 2/2 souls, randomly improved by corpses you spent. So if you really high roll, you could put if you've spent like 20 corpses, they could all go into the damage and it could deal 26 damage. Or you could be like everyone else and it's random, so you'll get like Lifesteal deal 10 damage, summon 7 2/5s like souls, which is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And the card is like bad kinds of RNG. It's not a fun kind of RNG to play around this card. It's incredibly expensive. It takes forever to ramp up. It's just not fun to play with. And then the only rainbow, like specific rainbow support card is Rainbow Seamstress, which is again another card people just don't really like very much. It's not very interesting. It is a 3-mana 3/3 undead battlecry. If your deck started with Blood, Frost, or Unholy cards, gain Lifesteal, Reborn, or Rush respectively. So because it's a battlecry and not an aura, which it definitely could be, it is a 3-mana 3/3 Rush, Lifesteal, Reborn that will just summon a 3/1 with nothing. And that's kind of boring. It couldn't have like Lifesteal and Rush again or something. I guess it would be too strong, especially for 3 mana. It'd probably need to be like 5 mana to do that. 5 mana, 3/3 Rush, Lifesteal, Reborn that summons with Lifesteal, Rush. Yeah, probably be a little more fair. But it's just, they're just boring. They're just boring cards. Like, what? This is the only payoff for playing Rainbow, too. Unlike playing Marrowgar, which gives you inevitability and lets you play, like, deal 3 damage to your opponent at the end of each turn, which is kind of fun. Or playing Frost, which lets you, like, play a lot of Frost spells and burn down your opponent, which, okay, it's a little less fun, I will be honest. The Frost Rune is pretty boring. I think they missed on that one pretty hard. Or you could play playing Unholy, which lets you, like, build gigantic boards and then have a lot of corpses to spend and deal a lot of damage with, and go wide and build and do all this like token generation stuff, which is really fun. Or play with Death Rattles, which is really fun. It is fun to play with. But then you have Rainbow, which the only payoff is that you get to play with like all these like 2-rune like combination cards, which are, you know, whatever. They're kind of cool, I guess. Reska, you have like Eliza now, which will give you like all your minions +1 attack permanently, all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I guess they're kind of cool, but then you have to play with Climatic Necrotic Explosion, and like, damn, dude, this card's just mad boring. But yeah, that's gonna be it from me. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me anything down below. Do you like the rune system? Do you dislike the rune system? I know everyone's gonna say they dislike it in the comments because it's a really hot topic that people don't. I think it's I genuinely think it's a failure. I think that triple runes have been abandoned for basically no reason, and Rainbow over-adapted onto. And it's boring. It is really, really boring. I wish I could play with my triple rune Death Knight, but I just can't. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed. Peace out.
Shadows are rising again!
Darker than they've ever been.